Imagine being told at the dinner table that you no longer have a place at your own family's celebration. That happened to me, and it hurt more than words can describe. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was Thanksgiving, the kind of day families usually come together to laugh, share stories, and enjoy each other's company. I, Claire, was 22, living at home for a few months while saving up for my own apartment. I had always loved family dinners, the warmth, the traditions, the little jokes that made everyone laugh. But this year felt different. From the moment I walked in, I could sense something was off. My parents, Karen and Mark, seemed more focused on making Madison, my older brother Ethan's fiancée, feel special than on actually enjoying the day with the family. Madison had that perfect smile, the kind that made people believe she was sweet and polite, but there was something in her eyes, a hint of arrogance and control that made me uneasy. She moved around the room like she owned the place, directing conversations, giving subtle instructions, and always making sure attention was on her. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just me being sensitive. But then, subtle things started happening. My parents would lean in and laugh at Madison's jokes while barely acknowledging mine. When they were setting up the table, I noticed them giving Madison the seat right at the center of attention, the one I always sat in. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just a temporary arrangement, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Dinner preparations felt heavier than usual. I could hear my mom asking Madison about her preferences, making sure everything suited her, while my questions or suggestions were met with distracted nods or hurried agreements. Even my brother Ethan seemed to notice something was wrong, but he said nothing, lost in his excitement about Madison. I tried to keep my composure, helping with dishes and setting the table, hoping my parents would notice my efforts and treat me fairly. But every time I glanced at Madison, she would give me a smug look, as if she knew she had already won. It wasn't just a chair at the table. It felt like my place in the family was being quietly taken away, step by step. I wanted to speak up, to demand my rightful place, but I held back. Something told me that patience and careful observation would be stronger than confrontation. I needed to understand what I was really dealing with before reacting. That Thanksgiving, what should have been a simple family dinner, became the beginning of a test. One that would challenge my patience, my courage, and my sense of belonging in ways I hadn't imagined. By the time everyone gathered around the table, the tension was almost invisible, but it was there, lingering in the corners of the room, in the quiet glances and half-smiles. And I knew deep down that this night would mark the start of something that would change the way I saw my family, my brother, and even myself. The moment I walked toward the dining table, I felt a knot in my stomach. My parents, smiling too brightly, were busy welcoming Madison, and before I could even take my seat, they had already slid her into the chair I had always sat in. Karen said, "Claire, honey, why don't you let Madison sit here today? It's a special occasion for her." I froze, my mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. I felt a wave of shock and humiliation crash over me. This wasn't just about a chair. It felt like my entire place in the family, the years of shared meals, laughter, and traditions, were being brushed aside for someone who hadn't even been part of our family for long. I glanced around the table, hoping someone would notice, hoping for a sign that I wasn't being completely invisible. Other family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Uncle Joe gave a small, awkward smile, and my cousin Lily looked down at her plate. No one spoke, but their faces showed that they recognized the unfairness of what had just happened. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, strained, and fragile, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced. Should I speak up? Should I demand my seat back? But every time I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat. Madison, sitting there with that smug little smile, acted as if she belonged there completely, as if the entire evening had been planned around her. My stomach twisted in anger and disbelief. Grandma Helen, sitting at the head of the table, noticed immediately. Her eyes flicked to me, and then to my parents. There was a quiet understanding in her gaze, a mix of concern and disapproval. But she didn't intervene, not yet. She seemed to be letting the situation play out for a reason I couldn't understand at the time. I forced myself to take the nearest empty chair, a small one tucked to the side, away from the center of conversation. It felt cold and insignificant, and every movement Madison made seemed designed to remind me of my displacement. She laughed a little too loudly at my brother's jokes, leaned in as if she owned the space, and even passed around the cranberry sauce with a sense of authority. I could feel the heat of embarrassment on my cheeks and tried to focus on the plate in front of me, on anything other than the humiliation I was experiencing. The voices around the table continued, conversations flowing smoothly for everyone else, but for me, time seemed to slow. Every smile Madison threw my way, every approving nod from my parents, felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. I realized then that this wasn't an accident or a simple mistake. My parents had chosen her over me, and it cut deeper than I expected. I swallowed hard, determined not to cry, and reminded myself that I wasn't powerless. I just needed to watch, to wait, and to figure out the right way to respond. Because if they thought I would let this go without notice, they had no idea who I was. I quietly slipped away from the table and retreated to the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the counter. The warmth of the room felt hollow, and I fought hard to keep my tears from falling. Every time I thought about the way my parents had given Madison my seat, my chest tightened and my stomach churned. I felt small, invisible, and completely dismissed in a place that was supposed to be my home. As I leaned against the counter, memories from my childhood came rushing back. I remembered family birthdays where Ethan always got the bigger slice of cake, the louder cheers, the extra attention. I recalled holidays when my ideas for games or decorations were brushed aside, while Ethan's suggestions were praised. I had always known there was a pattern, but today it had been thrown into sharp focus. The favoritism wasn't subtle anymore, it was blatant. And now, even as an adult, it seemed nothing had changed. I thought about all the times I had tried to speak up, to share my feelings, to earn acknowledgement, only to be told I was overreacting or being too sensitive. My parents had a way of laughing off my concerns while treating Ethan's complaints with immediate attention. That pattern, that consistent bias, now felt like a chain around me, holding me back from being seen and respected. Anger mixed with hurt as I wiped at my eyes and tried to think clearly. I didn't want to yell, argue, or make a scene. That would only give Madison the satisfaction of watching me crumble. No, I needed a plan, something quiet but powerful. I needed to reclaim my respect in a way that couldn't be ignored. I began running through ideas in my mind, thinking about ways to show my strength without appearing desperate. Maybe I could highlight Madison's hypocrisy in subtle ways, letting others see who she really was. Maybe I could regain my place at the table not by confrontation, but by careful observation and action. Every thought felt like a small spark of control, and for the first time that night, I felt a little steadier. The kitchen, once just a place to escape, became my refuge. I could hear laughter from the dining room, Madison's voice weaving through the conversation, and I let the sound fuel my determination instead of breaking me down. I realized that this wasn't just about a chair at the table. It was about my place in the family, about respect, and about finally standing up for myself. I took a deep breath and made a silent promise. I wouldn't let this go unnoticed. I wouldn't let Madison or my parents erase me from my own family's celebration. I would be patient, I would be careful, and I would reclaim my dignity. And when the time was right, they would see that I was stronger than they had ever believed. I stayed quiet at the table, keeping my focus on Madison, watching how she moved and spoke. It didn't take long for me to notice her patterns. She laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, leaned in too closely when people talked, and somehow managed to turn even small family traditions into something she could subtly criticize. Every time my mom brought out a favorite dish or mentioned an old story, Madison would add a comment, a suggestion, or a little critique, making it seem like she knew better. She wasn't just trying to fit in, she was trying to show she was above everyone else. The more I watched, the more obvious it became. Her charm was a mask, and behind it was arrogance and manipulation. She had a way of speaking that made others second-guess themselves, even over small things. I quietly made mental notes, cataloging her little moves, her subtle attempts to take over the room and make everyone think she was in charge. Every gesture, every word, every calculated smile gave me more insight into her true nature. It wasn't easy to stay calm. Every little action of hers reminded me of the unfairness of the day, but I forced myself to breathe and remain composed. If I let my anger show, Madison would use it as proof that she had succeeded in pushing me aside. I refused to give her that satisfaction. Amid the tension, Grandma Helen noticed me in the corner of the room. She gave me a small, reassuring smile, the kind that said she understood without having to speak a word. Later, she brushed past me in the kitchen, whispering, "I see you, Claire. Don't worry, you know what to do." That tiny gesture gave me a surge of courage. I realized I wasn't entirely alone. Someone in the family recognized the unfairness, and her quiet support reminded me that patience and careful observation could be powerful. As I continued to watch Madison, I began to think about ways to turn the situation around. I didn't need to confront her immediately or make a scene. I could use what I knew about her behavior, her need to control and impress, to reveal her true self in small, undeniable ways. I imagined subtle moments where the family could see her arrogance or manipulation without me having to say anything. The idea of quietly reclaiming my respect felt stronger than any immediate confrontation. By the end of the evening, I felt a small sense of victory. I hadn't yelled or stormed out. I had stayed composed, observed carefully, and even started to understand Madison's tactics. For the first time that day, I felt like I had some control. Seeds of revenge, not cruel but just, were forming in my mind. I knew I could regain my place in the family, not by shouting but by being smart, patient, and strategic. I left the dinner feeling stronger than I had when it started. I understood that the battle wasn't about being loud. It was about being seen, respected, and proving my worth without letting anyone, even Madison, take it away from me. The dinner had been going for a while when Madison, with that smug smile, made a comment that cut right through me. "Claire, maybe next time you can try serving the mashed potatoes the right way," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went quiet for a moment, and then my parents laughed nervously, as if to smooth over the awkwardness. My face burned, and my anger rose like a storm I had no choice but to contain. I wanted to snap back, to tell her how rude and unnecessary her remark was, but I held my tongue. I could feel the heat of humiliation in the room, and I realized that Madison thrived on reactions. She wanted to see me flustered, to enjoy the power she thought she had. I clenched my hands under the table and reminded myself that patience and observation were stronger than immediate confrontation. Grandma Helen noticed the tension immediately. She looked at Madison with sharp, quiet eyes, then at my parents, and leaned forward slightly. "We should remember this is a family dinner," she said calmly, her voice soft but firm. "And it's important that everyone feels welcome and respected." She didn't call Madison out directly, but her words carried weight. There was an unspoken warning in her tone, a reminder that entitlement and arrogance had limits. The subtle intervention shifted the energy in the room, though not completely. Madison's smile faltered slightly, but only for a second. My parents looked uncomfortable, as if they realized they might have overstepped in their efforts to please her. I caught Grandma Helen's eyes across the table, and she gave me a tiny nod of encouragement. It was enough to let me know that I wasn't alone, that someone in the family still saw me and understood what was happening. Meanwhile, Ethan, my brother, seemed completely oblivious to Madison's cruelty. He laughed at her comment, not noticing the humiliation in my expression, and continued talking as if nothing had happened. It stung to see him so blind, to know that he didn't recognize the way she had crossed a line. Part of me wanted to shake him and make him see, but I reminded myself that this wasn't about him yet. My focus had to stay on observing and understanding Madison's patterns. Throughout the rest of the dinner, tension simmered quietly. Madison tried to dominate conversations, inserting small criticisms and sarcastic remarks, while my parents nervously smiled along. I stayed composed, speaking only when necessary, and letting my calm presence contrast with her overbearing behavior. Every little gesture she made, every smug comment, only reinforced what I already knew. Her charm was fragile, and her confidence could be undone by careful observation and strategic patience. By the end of the meal, I felt a quiet determination growing inside me. Madison may have tried to humiliate me, and my parents may have laughed nervously, but I wasn't defeated. I had the advantage of seeing her clearly, and I knew that with careful steps, I could reclaim my place and expose the arrogance she hid behind her smile. After that tense dinner, I knew I couldn't let things go as they were. Madison had crossed a line, and I needed a way to respond, not with anger, but with strategy. I spent the next few days quietly thinking, watching, and taking mental notes. I realized the key wasn't to confront her directly. It was to expose her behavior subtly so that others could see the truth for themselves. I started noticing patterns in Madison's actions. She would casually talk down to family members, pretending to be helpful while actually undermining them. She flaunted her privilege, mentioning her expensive vacations or designer clothes, as if everyone should admire her for it. She also pretended to be generous and kind, but her gestures always had a hidden motive. Each little contradiction, each subtle hypocrisy, became a piece of the puzzle I was quietly collecting. I began writing down these observations in a notebook I kept hidden. At first, it felt obsessive, but I reminded myself that this wasn't about resentment. It was about preparation. I wanted to reclaim my respect and dignity in the family without creating a scene or stooping to her level. I reflected on my feelings, recognizing that revenge didn't have to be cruel. It was about proving to myself and everyone else that I deserved respect and a place in my own family. That realization brought a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Grandma Helen noticed my focus and quietly pulled me aside one afternoon while we were in the kitchen. She didn't scold or lecture. Instead, she shared stories from our family history about relatives who had stood up for themselves in times of unfairness. "Sometimes the strongest way to fight is quietly, Claire," she said, her voice low but firm. "You don't need to shout or embarrass anyone. You just need to be smart, patient, and let the truth reveal itself." Her words sank in deeply. I realized that this was more than just about Madison. It was about claiming my own power and asserting my place in the family. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My plan didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It could be subtle, strategic, and effective. I could show the family who Madison really was without ever appearing vindictive or petty. Over the next few days, I continued to observe and document, noting every inconsistency and every moment Madison tried to manipulate or impress. I kept my emotions in check, letting my calmness contrast with her arrogance. Each small victory, like catching her in a lie or noticing her controlling behavior, felt like progress. By the end of that week, I felt prepared. I had a clear plan, the support of Grandma Helen, and a strong sense of purpose. Revenge wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about quietly restoring my respect, proving my strength, and letting Madison's true nature reveal itself naturally. I knew that the coming family gathering would be my opportunity to put my plan into motion, and for the first time, I felt confident that I could handle it with grace and intelligence. The next family gathering came sooner than I expected, and this time, I walked in prepared. I didn't feel nervous or angry. I felt calm, steady, and in control. I reminded myself that I didn't need to expose Madison loudly. I just needed to let her reveal herself. As everyone settled in, conversations began naturally. Madison jumped in quickly, just like always, talking about herself, her plans, and her opinions. When she mentioned a charity she claimed to support often, I gently asked simple questions, keeping my tone polite and curious. I asked where it was based and what kind of work they did. She hesitated, stumbling over her words, giving vague answers that didn't quite match what she had said before. A few family members exchanged looks, clearly noticing the gap between her confidence and her knowledge. Later, she bragged about organizing events and helping everyone during holidays. I calmly mentioned a moment she had complained about doing the smallest task, framing it as a harmless memory. Madison laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but the charm she usually relied on didn't land the same way. The room felt different. People were listening more closely now, not just to me, but to her. I stayed relaxed, never raising my voice or sounding accusatory. Each time Madison exaggerated or twisted a story, I followed up with gentle questions or quiet reminders of what really happened. I let the truth sit in the room without forcing it. Slowly, the picture of her perfection began to crack. Family members who once nodded along now looked uncomfortable. Some stopped laughing at her jokes. Others redirected conversations away from her. Her tone changed too. The sweetness in her voice faded, replaced by impatience and sharp comments that only highlighted her arrogance. Without realizing it, she was doing my work for me. Throughout it all, I remained composed. I smiled, listened, and spoke only when it mattered. I didn't need to defend myself or seek approval. The humiliation I had once felt was slowly turning into quiet strength. I could feel it in the way I sat, the way I spoke, and the way people began to look at me differently. Ethan watched the shift happen, confusion slowly replacing his easy smile. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was starting to see what I had seen all along. My parents grew quieter too, their attention no longer fully locked on Madison. By the end of the gathering, Madison no longer seemed untouchable. Her confidence was shaky, her words careless. And I realized something important. I hadn't taken anything from her. I had simply stepped back and allowed her true nature to show. For the first time since this all began, I felt whole again. Not because I had won, but because I had stayed true to myself. I had turned humiliation into strength without ever lowering myself, and that quiet victory felt more powerful than any argument ever could. The room was quieter than usual when Grandma Helen finally decided to speak. She didn't raise her voice or sound angry, but when she cleared her throat, everyone listened. She sat up straight, folding her hands calmly, and looked directly at my parents. Her presence alone carried authority, the kind that came from years of being the backbone of our family. She spoke about family values, about how a home should be a place where no one feels smaller or less important. She reminded everyone that respect starts inside the family, not outside of it. Her words were careful, but their meaning was clear. She spoke about fairness, about how love should never depend on who is new, impressive, or loudest in the room. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the first time, they looked embarrassed. They avoided eye contact, their smiles gone, replaced by quiet realization. Grandma Helen didn't accuse them directly, but she didn't need to. Her message was clear enough for anyone with a conscience to understand. Then she gently turned her attention toward Madison, not attacking her, but questioning the way she carried herself. She spoke about humility, about joining a family rather than trying to lead it. She said that entitlement has no place at a table built on love and respect. Madison stiffened, her face tightening as she crossed her arms. She tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but Grandma Helen continued calmly, not allowing her to take control of the moment. Madison's confidence cracked. Her voice grew sharp, defensive. She tried to explain herself, but her words only made her seem more self-centered. The room felt heavy, as if everyone finally saw what had been hidden in plain sight. No one rushed to defend her this time. I stayed quiet, watching everything unfold. I didn't need to say a word. The truth was doing the talking for me. I could see it in the way my parents avoided looking at Madison, in the way family members nodded slowly as Grandma Helen spoke. I felt no need to interrupt or prove anything. My calm felt stronger than any argument. Ethan looked torn, glancing between Madison and Grandma Helen. For the first time, he seemed unsure, no longer blindly confident in his choices. That uncertainty told me more than words ever could. Grandma Helen ended her words by reminding everyone that family should protect its own, not push them aside. Her voice softened at the end, but the message stayed firm. Silence followed, thick and revealing. In that moment, I realized how powerful patience could be. I had waited, observed, and stayed steady. I didn't need revenge in the loud sense. I had respect, truth, and time on my side. And as I sat there quietly, I knew that everything was finally shifting in my favor. After that moment, the energy in the room changed in a quiet but powerful way. Conversations restarted, but they were different now. Family members who had once stayed silent began to look at me with warmth and understanding. Small gestures spoke louder than words. An aunt pulled out a chair for me beside her. A cousin asked my opinion on a family plan. These simple acts told me everything I needed to know. I was no longer invisible. Madison, on the other hand, seemed unsettled. Her voice lost its smooth confidence. She interrupted more, laughed too loudly, and tried to pull attention back to herself, but it didn't work the way it used to. People listened politely but without the admiration she once enjoyed. Her behavior stood out now, no longer hidden behind charm. Ethan sat quietly for a long time. I could see the struggle on his face. He watched Madison closely, noticing the sharp tone in her words, the way she dismissed others when things didn't go her way. For the first time, he asked her to calm down. That single moment said everything. The image he had built of her was starting to crack. Later, he pulled me aside and asked gently if I had noticed this side of her before. I didn't blame or accuse. I simply nodded and told him I had been watching for a while. He didn't argue. He didn't defend her. He just stood there quietly, processing the truth. That was when I knew something had shifted for good. Inside me, something finally loosened. The tight knot of hurt I had been carrying slowly unraveled. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt light. My dignity, which had felt taken from me, was back where it belonged. I didn't need an apology or a dramatic moment. Being seen and understood was enough. Across the room, Grandma Helen caught my eye. She gave me a small, proud smile, the kind that carried years of wisdom and love. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it filled me with strength. Her look said, "You handled this the right way." In that moment, I understood what she had been teaching me all along. Patience wasn't weakness. Silence wasn't surrender. Integrity had a way of revealing truth without force. I hadn't lowered myself or betrayed who I was. I had stood still while others showed their true colors. As the gathering came to an end, I felt a sense of closure settle over me. I didn't need to fight anymore. The family had seen the truth, Ethan had opened his eyes, and I had reclaimed my place with grace. That quiet victory felt deeper and more lasting than anything I could have imagined. When everything finally settled, I took time to reflect on what I had been through. What started as a painful moment had turned into a long emotional journey. I had felt betrayed in a place where I expected love. I had felt humiliated without deserving it. For a while, I questioned my worth and wondered if staying silent meant accepting disrespect. But now, looking back, I understood that silence had been my strength, not my weakness. I realized that revenge doesn't always look like loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's choosing not to react right away, choosing patience over impulse. I didn't need to embarrass anyone or raise my voice. I simply stayed true to myself and allowed the truth to surface on its own. That quiet resilience gave me power I didn't know I had. Through this experience, I learned the importance of self-respect. I learned that you don't need approval from people who fail to see your value. Respect begins with how you carry yourself, even when others try to diminish you. By remaining calm and observant, I protected my dignity and reclaimed my place without losing myself in anger. I also gained confidence in a deeper way. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that stands firm even when ignored. I no longer felt the need to prove myself. I knew who I was, and that knowledge grounded me. The pain I once felt had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more aware. My place in the family no longer felt uncertain. I wasn't fighting for it anymore. It was simply there, where it had always belonged. That sense of peace was worth every moment of patience it took to get there. This journey taught me something I hope others can hold on to too. When people try to push you aside, it doesn't always mean you are weak. Sometimes it means they are threatened by your presence. And sometimes the best response isn't to fight back loudly, but to stand steady and let time reveal the truth. I walked away from this experience with my head held high, my heart lighter, and my sense of self fully restored. I didn't lose anything important. I gained clarity, strength, and self-respect. Sometimes the people who push you aside only show you how strong you really are.